A chill entered the large hall as three cloaked figures emerged, the tallest clad in red, their draped shawls trailing through the air. The middle one in a rich purple, their mantle just barely hiding the heeled boots clicking on the wooden floors. The shortest wore a thick black cape, but it was hard to make out. It seemed like shadows itself to envelop them. They made their way to the end of the room where a raised platform held a lavish-looking throne. Once there, the purple-clad figure let their cloak drop to the floor. A female form was revealed, with long flowing red hair that seemed like smoldering flames in the dimmed lighting. Her matching ensemble wrapped nicely around her curves, made of linen and reinforced with leather. Her sculpted face looked intense, and her luminous green eyes betrayed no emotion as she lowered herself onto the throne. To her right, the shadowy figure trailed around for a bit before retreating back into the shadows. Just a glimmer of two blue eyes were seen, glistening like sapphires. Every so often, trails of pure darkness seemed to shift around their position. At last, the third figure settled into her place to the left of the throne. Seemingly out of thin air, they procured a comfortable chair and table, and were setting out a variety of peculiar teacups, saucers, spoon, and other such items, as if they were hosting a tea party. After spending a considerable amount of time arranging their items, the figure finally sat down and removed her hood. An impressive amount of unruly brown hair spilled out, framing the woman's innocent-looking face. Just a faint gleam of derangement flashed through her hazel eyes as she scanned the still empty hall in front of her. With everyone in place, a certain stillness returned to the hall. The room itself was spacious, but with every corner shrouded in shadows, a heaviness could be felt, as if the darkness could consume you at every moment. From what was able to be seen, however, it looked imposing. Thick wool curtains trailed down the walls, with inconceivable imagery in intricate embroidery. The wooden floor paneling was polished to perfection, and the contours of more extravagant furniture could be made out stacked up against the walls. The woman seated in the throne snapped her fingers once. Instantly, a previously obscured door to the right of the hall opened, and another figure materialized. When stepping into the hall, they raised their hands, and every single candle and torch flared to life, bathing the hall in light. With everything being illuminated now, it was easy to make out the newcomer's face. She was obviously female, yet bore an androgynous aspect to it. Long dark hair was braided down to the small of her back. If let loose, it would certainly trail all the way through her thighs. Her chest was strapped into a corset with a sophisticated design, and her blue robe flowed down to rest just above the ground, rippling as if stirred by waves. She smiled as she stepped further into the room, immediately lightening the mood. But it was the red-headed leader who finally broke the silence. "Ah, Esmeralda, you do know how to light up a room. Thank you for joining us on such short notice." Esmeralda bowed gracefully. "Of course, my queen, I am not normally one to leave my chambers to meet with the common folk, but I could not ignore such a summons. I am at your service, Lady Indigo." "No need for such titles here, my dearest warlock. You know I prefer us to be on equal footing," Indigo chuckled, her wispy voice still bearing a note of authority. "Now," the queen said, letting her gaze go from left to right, feeling secure in the presence of her most trusted allies. "Please, take your seating wherever you see fit. I am already joined by Lady Mary, who will accommodate our guests, and Justice Carmara, who will ensure our safety and our guests' honesty." Esmeralda nodded and raised her hands again, and an ornate chair from the side of the room took flight and gently placed itself to the right of the throne, settling close by Mara's obscured figure. The warlock walked up to the chair and seated herself, slinging her long braid to rest against the back. While Indigo engaged with Mary in some idle chatter, Esmeralda felt a shiver run through her body. One of Mara's shadowy tendrils had crept up to her and was now wrapping itself around her shoulder. She playfully swatted at it and hissed, "Stop that," under her breath. A soft giggle was heard, but the tendril retracted and instead curled itself around one of the chair's legs. Meanwhile, Mary had procured some sweet-smelling cupcakes and was letting Indigo pick between several of them. The endearing girl had a certain charm to her, but those close to her knew to watch her carefully. Mara and Indigo had found the poor girl while on a trip to Greece. Recognizing her blood as unmistakably kindred, they approached her. As they came closer, an alluring melody started to fill their minds. Enraptured and mesmerized by the sound, they seemingly drifted towards the girl. But just as they almost reached her, a deafening screech knocked them down and the girl fled. Intrigued, they tracked her down, and upon finding her in a more benevolent state, they were able to converse with her. While still having a hard time making sense of her babbling, an obvious sign of her Malkavian bloodline, she seemed dependable enough. Indigo took pity on the girl and brought her back to the castle and raised her as if she was her own child. Her derangement would, of course, never dissipate, but it was at least contained under the Queen's care. With her given the role of entertaining visitors, the Malkavian has flourished. Between elaborate tea parties or performing before the peasants, she seemed to really enjoy herself. Even her speech had improved, and Indigo was able to pick out the wisdom from her madness. She never belittled the girl. She could see both the knowledge in her words and the pain in her heart. Though she never directly asked, the little tidbits about her past she shared were horrifying. Indigo figured the whole story would come when the time was right. After helping the girl select the perfect type of cupcake, she directed her attention to the right of her. She noticed one of the Justicar's tendrils wrap around Esmeralda's chair. Chuckling under her breath, she recalled the time she first discovered the fraternization going on between her loyal Justicar and Warlock. Needing Esmeralda to help her with a certain ritual, she had made her way down to the dungeons. She had expected to find the Warlock studying her books, not pinning her loyal advisor to the grimy walls. Not wanting to either confront or interrupt them, she had simply watched the two women frantically undo each other's robes and desperately explore every part of their bodies. It wasn't until the Warlock closed her eyes for a moment, before letting them flash open, her left eye blazing with magic, that Indigo really started to be intrigued. Between Esmeralda's legs, a similar magic had flared. From her position, Indigo could only see the look of pure rapture in Mara's eye as she was forcefully penetrated by the magical cock. It took everything out of her to tear herself away from the scene and let them enjoy their moment of intimacy. Pulling back her attention to the present, Indigo addressed everyone in the room. As you all know by now, I've gathered you here today for a special occasion. Justicar Mara has told me of murmurs among her subjects. They are unsatisfied with their rights and obligations. Tonight, I have arranged for them to select a few of them to serve as representatives. I'll grant them audience and listen to their plights. The Queen looked to her left. Please, my sweet Mary, would you make sure everyone is properly taken care of with refreshments? The Malkavian nodded lightly. Looking to her right, the Queen addressed her Justicar, piercing right through her umbral shroud. Mara, do not scare the people too much this time. We all remember the incident with the barmaid, and I would not like to see a repeat of that. An amused snicker was heard, and Indigo couldn't help letting a smile form on her lips. Of course, my Queen, I wouldn't want to cause such a scene in public. Satisfied, Indigo directed her attention to the Warlock, who was letting small magical orbs float through the air, her gaze intent. Esmeralda, would you be so kind as to open the doors? I do believe we are ready for our guests. Esmeralda let the orbs dissipate, and with the flick of her wrist, a crackling sound filled the room. It reached the large doors at the far end of the room, and they swung open.